a way that's slower and takes more time. People will tell you to knock that off and do it the right way. Now, from 1894 to 1899, he worked with Edward Neville at Deir el-Bahari, where he recorded the wall reliefs in the temple of Hatshepsut, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing that one. In 1899, Carter was appointed Inspector of Monuments for Upper Egypt in the Egyptian Antiquities Service. Based at Luxor, he oversaw a number... Who knew?
Yeah, I knew.
I didn't know he lived in Vegas.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Sorry. Josh Gates made that same dumb joke, and I don't know why I repeated it. There we go, moving on. Based at Luxor, he oversaw a number of excavations and restorations at nearby Thebes. While in the Valley of the Kings, he supervised the systematic exploration of the valley by the American archaeologist Theodore Davis. In 1904, after a dispute with local people over tomb thefts, he was transferred to the Inspectorate of Lower Egypt. Carter was praised for his improvement in the protection of and accessibility to existing excavation sites and his development of a grid block system for searching for tombs. The Antiquities Service also provided funding for Carter to head his own excavation projects.
Very nice.
Yes.
So he was kind of in it to win it as far as the Egyptian historical stuff went.
Right. And he only resigned from the Antiquities Service in 1905 after a formal inquiry into what became known as the Saqqara Affair, a violent confrontation between Egyptian site guards and a group of French tourists. Carter sided with the Egyptian personnel, refusing to apologize when the French authorities made an official complaint. Moving back to Luxor, and I wouldn't apologize to the French either. They like Jerry Lewis. I mean, what's that supposed to say about him? Anyway, moving on. Carter was without formal... I'm joking, by the way. Got nothing against the French. Like them very much. Carter was without formal employment for nearly 3 years. He made a living by painting and selling watercolors to tourists, and in 1906, acting as a freelance draftsman for Theodore Davis. In 1907, he was... What?
Nothing. I'll talk about it later. Sorry, guys, I just noticed something.
In 1907, he began to work for Lord Carnarvon, who employed him to supervise the excavation of nobles' tombs in Deir el-Bahari, near Thebes. Gaston Maspero, the head of the Egyptian Antiquities Service, had recommended Carter to Carnarvon as he knew he would apply modern archaeological methods and systems of recordings. Carter soon developed a good working relationship with his patron, with Lady Birdclear, Carnarvon's sister, observing that for the next 16 years, the two men worked together with varying fortune, yet ever united not more by their common aim than by their mutual regard and affection.
Aw, they were buddies.
They were friends.
Very nice.
So I can really go on. He did a lot of stuff. But, long story short...
Too late.
Lord Carnarvon received the concession to dig in the Valley of Kings, which is really, if you're an Egyptologist looking for the tombs of pharaohs, that's pretty much it. That's the work, you know?
That is your Sunset Strip. Your
that's your
Rodeo Drive.
Yep.
That's where you want to be.
Right. And so... By 1922, they really hadn't discovered much of note, and Lord Carnarvon was like ready to pack it in. Carter talked him into funding one more season in the sand. Carnarvon agreed.
They built a castle.
No.
Not even a cute little one with flags.
No. Carter returned to the Valley of Kings and investigated a line of huts that he had abandoned a few seasons earlier. The crew cleared the huts and the rock debris beneath, and on the 4th of November, 1922, their young water boy accidentally stumbled on a stone that turned out to be the top of a flight of steps cut into the bedrock. Carter had the steps partially dug out until the top of the mud-plaster doorway was found. The doorway stamped with the indistinct cartouche, which are oval seals with hieroglyphic writing. Carter ordered the staircase to be refilled and sent a telegram to Carnarvon, who arrived from England 2.5 weeks later on 23rd November, accompanied by his daughter, Lady Evelyn Herbert.
Aww. That's a good name.
So on the 24th of November, 1922, the full extent of the stairway was cleared and a seal containing Tutenkhamen's cartouche found on the outer doorway. This door was removed, and the rubble-filled corridor behind cleared, revealing the door of the tomb itself. On the 26th of November, Carter with Carnarvon, Lady Evelyn, and the assistant, Arthur Callender, in attendance, made a tiny breach in the top left-hand corner of the doorway, using a chisel that his grandmother had given him for his 17th birthday.
Very nice.
He was able to peer in by the light of a candle and see that many of the gold and ebony treasures were still in place. He did not yet know whether it was a tomb or merely an old cache, but he did see a promising sealed doorway between two sentinel statues. Carnarvon asked, "Can you see anything?" Carter replied, "Yes, wonderful things."
Aww.
The tomb was designated KV-62. The tomb was then secured to be entered in the presence of an official of the Egyptian Department of Antiquities the next day. However, that night, Carter, Carnarvon, Lady Evelyn, and Callender apparently made an unauthorized visit, becoming the first people in modern times to enter the tomb. Some sources suggest that the group also entered the inner burial chamber in this account. A small hole was found in the chamber's sealed doorway, and Carter, Carnarvon, and Lady Evelyn crawled through. The next morning is the official date of the finding, 27 November. In the presence of an Egyptian official, Callender rigged up electric lighting, illuminating a vast hall of items, including gilded couches, chests, thrones, and shrines. They also saw evidence of two further chambers, including the sealed doorway to the inner burial chamber, guarded by two life-size statues of Tutankhamen. In spite of the evidence of break-ins in ancient times, the tomb was virtually intact and would ultimately be found to contain over 5,000 items.
Wow.
So, and I could go on. Carter had a notable life and lived a lot. But basically, the rest of his life can be summed up as follows. He really brought Egyptology back to the fore. He made it something that people talked about and were interested in, and he was famous for this for the rest of his life. Now, he died at 64, and by that point, he had lost much of his fame. He was working as basically the curator of two museums in America. Like, people knew it was discovered by Howard Carter, but I'm sure at that point in time, if people ran into him, it was like, not the Howard Carter, you know.
Yeah.
And so he kind of lost whatever fame he had. I mean, in a way, he lives on forever. He's the discoverer. But that's the larger-than-life Carter. The other Howard Carter, the real one, sort of just became this mawkish guy that worked in museums. And people really didn't know what he did, what he had done. I mean, people in the museum did, but he had to deal with boys going to the museum acting like boys who had no clue they were in the presence of the guy that found Tut.
I would have to assume, though, that you don't do that for the notoriety of it. You do it for the love of the items. And
that is true. That is definitely true. A lot of people will tell you, well, then, nothing happened to Carter. He died in relative obscurity. I wouldn't say he truly fully escaped the curse. He sort of faded into obscurity.
Well, some people would call that a curse, but some people actually would call that a blessing. So I guess it's all in how you look at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Lord Carnarvon, whose real name was George Herbert, or actually his full name, George Edward Stanhope Molyneux Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon. He also called himself Lord Porchester. Boy, he needed a smack. Just be yourself! Lord Carnarvon, Lord Porchester, whatever. Okay, look, Carnarvon, he was born wealthy, stayed wealthy most of his life.
Maybe he should have, just gone by Steve or Jerry.
Steve or Jerry.
Maybe a Josh would have gone over well.
But he was well known as a person who raised horses for racing. He was a member of the Jockey Club and appointed one of the stewards of the new Newbury Racecourse. His family has maintained the connection ever since. Mm-hmm. His grandson, the 7th Earl, was racing manager to Queen Elizabeth herself.
Fancy.
Yeah, so he loved motor cars. And he was a big fan of Egyptology. So when he met Carter, they were kindred spirits. They both had a love for the scholarly side of it. And they wanted to see things done right. And so that's part of why they became such good friends. And it's part of why Carter was able to talk him into going one more season, even though it was really eating into Carnarvon's finances at the time.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then there are some others that like George J. Gould did not find the tomb, but he was a railroad magnate and a wealthy American financier. He knew Carnarvon, and so he visited the tomb of King Tut about a year later. Mm-hmm. Aubrey Herbert, Lord Carnarvon's half-brother, made a trip to also see the tomb. Now, I don't know why, because he had a degenerative eye disease, and he was pretty much like 80% blind or something like that. Just couldn't, effectively, let's call him blind. He was a blind guy. Mm-hmm. Hugh Evelyn White was an archaeologist who was consulted by Carter. He visited the tomb, and we are not sure, but he might have helped to excavate the site. Aaron Ember was a friend of many who had discovered the tomb. He was actually writing a book based on the discoveries entitled The Egyptian Book of the Dead.
Huh.
So,
Jinx.
Yep, these are some of our dramatis personae. Sir Archibald Douglas Reed was an X-ray technician who X-rayed Tutankhamun's body. Howard Carter brought a canary along with him. His canary was beloved by the locals, who called it a golden bird. And he was also joined by James Henry Breasted, another British archaeologist. So that's our dramatis personae, most of them. And others I will cover later, but these are some of the big ones. Now,
main players, as you were.
Yes. Now,
for those of you playing along with finger puppets at home.
Right. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the curse. Carnarvon. Well, okay. Let's go chronological order, or at least start that way. I mentioned the canary. While everybody else was checking out the tomb, Breasted went back to Carter's
bird.
Well, to Carter's flat, where he was staying in Egypt.
Okay.
To check on the bird, among other things. And he discovered that the bird
had been eaten by a cat.
Had been eaten by a cobra.
A cobra?
It is Egypt. They have them there. But cobras are one of the defining animals of Egyptian royalty. So the tomb was broken into, and this cobra eats Carter's golden bird.
Poor Tweety.
A lot of locals saw this as an omen and not a good one. that this representative of the Egyptian royalty had taken this bird from Carter. They did not see